You think you know someone after 2 years of dating. You know their coffee order, their childhood stories, their dreams for the future. You've met their friends, stayed at their apartment countless times, and planned a future together. But what if everything you thought you knew was carefully constructed lies? What if the person you loved didn't just have secrets? They had an entirely different identity. I discovered my boyfriend Marcus wasn't just hiding something from me. He was hiding everything. The apartment wasn't his, the job didn't exist, and the name he'd given me wasn't even real. The man I thought I was going to marry was living a completely fabricated life, and I was the only person who didn't know it. My name is Kayla, and I'm a 26-year-old teacher from Charlotte. 2 years ago, I met Marcus at a bookstore where I was browsing the education section for classroom materials. He approached me with a question about a book I was holding, and we ended up talking for 2 hours about teaching, literature, and our shared love of coffee. Marcus told me he worked in digital marketing for a tech company downtown. He was charming, well-dressed, and seemed genuinely interested in my work with elementary school kids. He had this way of asking thoughtful questions and remembering small details about my life that made me feel seen and valued. Our first date was at a cozy restaurant where he seemed to know the staff, which impressed me and made him feel more established and trustworthy. Over our first few months of dating, Marcus painted a picture of a successful, stable life. He lived in a beautiful downtown loft apartment with modern furniture and expensive artwork. He drove a late model BMW and always seemed to have money for nice restaurants, weekend trips, and thoughtful gifts. When I asked about his family, he said his parents lived in California and that they weren't particularly close, which explained why I'd never met them. Marcus's schedule was flexible, which he attributed to working in digital marketing where much of his job could be done remotely. This meant he could often meet me for lunch during my planning periods or pick me up from school when my car was in the shop. His availability felt like evidence that he prioritized our relationship, and I appreciated having a boyfriend who seemed so invested in spending time with me. The apartment he showed me was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows, high-end appliances, and a walk-in closet full of designer clothes. He said he'd even lucky to get a good deal on the lease through a connection at work. Everything about his living situation suggested financial stability and good taste, which aligned with the successful professional image he projected. His friends seemed genuine and friendly whenever we went out together. They'd known him for years, they said, and would tell stories about shared experiences that seemed authentic and detailed. They treated me warmly and made me feel welcome in their group, which reinforced my belief that Marcus was exactly who he said he was. The only thing that occasionally struck me as odd was how little Marcus talked about his day-to-day work. When I'd ask specific questions about his projects or colleagues, he'd give vague responses and quickly change the subject. He'd say things like, "You wouldn't find it interesting," or "It's too boring to talk about," which I accepted because not everyone loves discussing their job. About 8 months into our relationship, I started noticing small inconsistencies that didn't quite add up, though I rationalized each one individually. Marcus would sometimes seem unfamiliar with basic details about his own apartment building, like which elevator to take or how the mailbox system worked. When I mentioned it, he'd laugh and say he was absent-minded about things like that. His work schedule became more erratic with frequent business trips that seemed to come up suddenly. He'd get calls at odd hours and step away to take them, always claiming they were urgent client issues that needed immediate attention. The trips were always to cities where he said he had important meetings, but he rarely brought back business cards, conference materials, or any of the typical evidence of professional travel. I also began to notice that Marcus never seemed to get mail at his apartment. In the year we'd been dating, I'd never seen a single piece of personal mail. No bills, no subscriptions, no packages. When I asked about it, he said he had everything sent to a P.O. box for security reasons. which seemed unusual but not impossible. His financial situation also raised questions that I tried to suppress. Marcus always had cash and never seemed worried about money, but I never saw him do any actual work. He'd spend entire days with me without checking email or taking work calls, which seemed inconsistent with the demanding marketing job he described. When I mentioned this, he said he was good at time management and had efficient systems for staying on top of his responsibilities. The most troubling sign was how Marcus reacted whenever unexpected situations arose. If we ran into someone I knew while we were out together, he'd become quiet and withdrawn. If I suggested spontaneous plans or wanted to stop by his apartment unannounced, he'd find reasons why it wasn't a good time. He seemed to need advance notice and control over our social interactions in a way that felt increasingly strange. 6 months before everything unraveled, I started paying closer attention to Marcus's belongings and living space. His closet was full of expensive clothes, but they all seemed relatively new, as if he'd purchased an entire wardrobe recently rather than accumulating items over time. There were no old photos, childhood mementos, or personal items that would indicate a history in Charlotte or connections to a past. His laptop and phone were password protected, which was normal, but he was extremely secretive about them. He'd close his laptop screen if I came near and would take his phone with him even to use the bathroom. When I needed to use his computer once for a school project, he seemed uncomfortable and watched me closely the entire time, as if he was worried I might see something I shouldn't. The breaking point came when I decided to surprise Marcus at his office for his birthday. I'd been planning to bring him lunch and meet his colleagues, something we'd talked about doing but never followed through on. I arrived at the address he'd given me for his company, excited to surprise him and finally see his professional world. The building was real, and the company he'd mentioned did exist, but when I asked the receptionist for Marcus Williams, she looked confused. She checked her directory multiple times and told me there was no one by that name working there. When I described him, she said she'd never seen anyone matching his description. Standing in that lobby, I felt the first crack in the foundation of everything I believed about our relationship. If Marcus didn't work where he said he worked, then what else about his life was fabricated? The discovery at his supposed workplace set me into a spiral of doubt and investigation that I'd never experienced before. Instead of confronting Marcus immediately, I decided I needed to understand the scope of what he'd been lying about. That decision led me down a rabbit hole that revealed the shocking truth about the man I thought I was going to marry. I started with his apartment building. I went to the leasing office and asked about tour availability, claiming I was interested in renting a similar unit. During the tour, I casually mentioned that my friend Marcus Williams lived in the building and loved it there. The leasing agent checked her records and told me that no one by that name was on any current lease. She did mention that Unit 4B, which I recognized as Marcus's apartment, was being sublet by the actual tenant who was working abroad for a year. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Marcus wasn't just lying about his job. He was living in someone else's apartment. Everything about his supposed home, his established life in Charlotte, his financial stability was built on a foundation of deception. I spent the next week conducting what felt like a private investigation into my own boyfriend's life. I discovered that the BMW he drove was registered to someone else entirely, likely borrowed or stolen. The expensive clothes, the designer watch, the lifestyle that had impressed me so much, none of it actually belonged to him. The most devastating discovery came when I decided to reverse search a photo of Marcus from social media. The search results showed the same photo on a dating profile under a completely different name, David Chen. The profile was active with recent login dates and described him as a single entrepreneur looking for serious relationships, but it got worse. There were multiple dating profiles, each with different names, different professions, and different backstories. Marcus Williams, the marketing executive, David Chen, the entrepreneur, Michael Torres, the freelance photographer, all the same person, all actively dating other women while in a committed relationship with me. The profiles revealed a pattern of sophisticated deception. Each identity was carefully crafted with consistent details and plausible backstories. He wasn't just casually lying about small things. He was running multiple elaborate cons simultaneously, presumably with several women who all believed they were in exclusive relationships with him. I found social media profiles for each identity, complete with fabricated work histories, fake friend connections, and manufactured life stories. The level of planning and detail was staggering. This wasn't impulsive deception. It was a systematic operation designed to manipulate multiple people simultaneously. The most heartbreaking discovery was finding photos of him with other women in locations I recognized as our special places. The romantic restaurant where he'd taken me for our 6-month anniversary, the hiking trail where we'd had our first serious conversation about the future, the bookstore where we'd met. He'd used all of these locations for dates with other women while maintaining identical relationships with each of us. As I sat in my car outside his apartment building, looking through dating profiles and social media accounts that revealed the extent of his deception, I realized that absolutely nothing about our relationship was real. The man I loved didn't exist. Marcus Williams was a character he'd created specifically to manipulate me, and I was just one of several women who'd fallen for the performance. Confronting someone who has built their entire relationship with you on lies is surreal in ways I never could have imagined. When I finally approached Marcus with evidence of his deception, his response was even more chilling than the lies themselves. He didn't deny it, didn't seem surprised that I'd discovered the truth, and didn't show any genuine remorse for what he'd done. Instead, Marcus seemed almost impressed that I'd figured it out, as if the whole thing had been an elaborate game and I'd finally solved the puzzle. He explained his system with a casualness that was more disturbing than anger would have been. He said he'd been running this type of operation for years, moving from city to city, creating identities, and building relationships with women who could provide him with financial and emotional support. The apartment, the car, the clothes, the lifestyle that had impressed me so much, it was all funded by the multiple women he was dating simultaneously. Each woman contributed something different to his operation. Some provided money directly, others offered places to stay, and some, like me, provided emotional stability and a sense of normalcy that helped him maintain his various personas. What devastated me most wasn't just that he lied about everything, but that he'd studied me carefully enough to create a persona he knew I'd fall for. Marcus Williams wasn't a random character. He was specifically designed to appeal to an elementary school teacher who valued stability, kindness, and intellectual conversation. He de-observed what I was looking for in a partner and built a character to match those desires exactly. The financial impact was significant, but not devastating. I lent him money for emergency situations that I now realized were fabricated, and I paid for many of our dates and trips when he claimed to be temporarily short on cash. But the emotional cost was immeasurable. I learned that I'd spent 2 years of my life loving someone who didn't exist, planning a future with a person who was fundamentally incapable of genuine connection, and trusting someone whose entire relationship with me was a calculated performance designed for his benefit. The hardest part was accepting that my instincts had failed me so completely. I pride myself on being perceptive about people, especially since working with children has taught me to read emotions and motivations carefully. But Marcus had exploited my trusting nature and my desire to see the best in people, using my own positive qualities against me. The investigation revealed that I wasn't his first victim in Charlotte, and I likely wouldn't be his last. He moved through cities systematically, building these elaborate deceptions, extracting what he could from his relationships and disappearing when the situation became unsustainable. I was just one stop on a well-traveled route of manipulation and fraud. Reporting the situation to police revealed that while what he'd done was morally reprehensible, much of it wasn't technically illegal. Identity fraud, using someone else's apartment, and emotional manipulation exist in legal gray areas that make prosecution difficult. The system isn't designed to address this type of systematic emotional and financial abuse. Today, I rebuilt my life with a much clearer understanding of red flags and the importance of verifying basic information about people I am dating. But the experience fundamentally changed how I view trust in relationships. I learned that some people are capable of sustained, elaborate deception that goes far beyond typical dishonesty. The most important lesson I learned is that love bombing, the overwhelming attention, gifts, and affection that Marcus showered on me early in our relationship, is often a red flag rather than a green one. Genuine connection builds gradually, while manufactured connection often starts intensely to override logical thinking. I also learned to trust my instincts when something feels off, even if I can't articulate exactly what's wrong. Those small inconsistencies I noticed and rationalized away were my subconscious mind trying to protect me from a danger my conscious mind didn't want to acknowledge. The question that haunts me isn't just how someone could live such an elaborate lie, but how many people are currently in relationships with partners who aren't who they claim to be. In an age of online dating and social media personas, how do we verify that the people we're falling in love with are actually real? If something feels too good to be true in a relationship, if someone seems perfectly designed to match what you're looking for, if their life lacks the messy details that make people human, trust that instinct. Sometimes the person you think you love doesn't actually exist, and the sooner you discover that truth, the sooner you can start building something real with someone who's worth your trust.